Are you tired of spending hours and hours on painting and decorating your terrain and still feeling like you'll never be done? What if you could create believable landscapes in minutes instead? Today, we're looking at an incredibly powerful tool, procedural placement. If you follow along in this video, you will build a procedural landscape from scratch, be using the procedural placement menu confidently, and build a solid foundation for more advanced procedural placement. Hi Virtual Landscape Architect, I'm Nadine. My mission is to build the most complete and practical place for farming simulator modding. In our last two videos, we explored the Giants Editor 10 i3D files and discussed terrain editing basics. If you haven't watched these, I'll add a link to my Giants Editor playlist. So without further ado, let's take it one step further with procedural placement. Instead of a lengthy explanation what procedural placement is, let me show you. Everything you see here is procedural. No manual painting or tree placement involved. You see, there is some variation on the ground. It's not all the same texture. Also, we have quite some different plants. And additionally, we also have patches of specific plants, like over here. And you have all these trees, varied and nicely spaced. And finally, we also have a nice transition between the forest and a meadow. And also here, the road underground is also placed procedurally, as well as the field next to it. All of this can be done with procedural placement. The core concept is that you define rules which textures and foliage should be applied and which trees planted, and then the Giants Editor will execute these rules in the areas which you specify. From the terrain editing video, we already know that procedural placement uses masks which are painted on the ground. We see that here, procedural placement, and then in the placement area we have all the available masks. By the way, instead of saying procedural placement all the time, I might just call it PP. These masks tell the Giants Editor where we want the PP rules executed, but we are still missing the part about what to do and what these rules are. This we can find in the PP window. So go to Window and then Procedural Placement. This window has several tabs. These are Masks, Scripts, Distances, Objects, and Rules. I know that sounds intimidating, but it really isn't. We won't go deep into every tab today. You only need 3 for now: Masks, Objects, and Rules. The other tabs will be explained in part 2 of the video. Let's break it down. Masks. The mask names are actually the entries which you see in the PP painting menu. So for example, Gen Acres, Gen Creeks. If I open that drop-down, we will also see these over here. These masks are linked to a file. You can see that here in this column. And you also have a resolution. The block mask here at the bottom is a mask which blocks procedural placement from being executed on the areas which are part of this mask. Let's have a closer look at the mask files. They are generally in the Data Mask subfolder of your Map i3D file. So let's look at them in the Windows Explorer. The masks are basically black and white PNG files. They are white where the mask has been painted and black where not. Now let's have a look at the Objects tab. The Objects tab is basically split in 3 sections. The upper part, which is very small over here, and then the middle part and the lower part. The upper part was initially meant to include textures. You can see that if we right click on it and it asks us to add a texture. But this is not necessary anymore, since the Giants Editor has now included all default textures already in the procedural placement menu. So this is not needed. The middle part is for foliage. If we right click here, we can add a foliage or we can delete. The lower part is for the objects. So in most cases, it will be trees. So here we have the name for the object, a reference to the i3D file. You can see the full path here. And then something about a distance matrix. We will see that in part 2. And lastly, the Rules tab. This is where the magic happens. We use all the settings from the previous tabs and define what should be done with them. So here in the left section, we have the list of available rules. Each rule has a checkbox in front of it to activate or deactivate it, and then the rule has a name. And if you click on the rule, on the right side, we load the details. Also, below that, we have a checkbox to select or deselect everything, and we have some arrows to move rules up or down, because the order of the rules does matter. They are executed from top to bottom. Let's have a look at the right side, where we have the details. So first thing you see is the name. It's the same as in the list box on the left, but here you can also change it. Then we have the script. We have a long list here, and you don't know yet what that means, but I will explain that in a minute. So basically this defines what will be done on your mask. And then you have a part about arguments. This can change based on the script which you selected, but mostly we have the object min distance, slope start and slope end for all scripts. And you have also the mask name. And then a bit further down we have the rule objects. This is basically the textures, foliage or objects which should be used within that rule. You could technically mix textures and foliage in one rule, but in reality you don't want to do that because that would be an either-or setting. So either you paint a texture or you plant a decoration, but mostly you want both. So you want a texture and some plants on it. And then you need 2 rules for that. So here you can see I named this one T grass base. So the T stands for texture. I use that as a kind of naming convention for myself. F stands for foliage. So I defined first the textures for the ground and then the foliage. Now that we went through the basics, let's put this knowledge into action. Load an empty map. You can either flatten out the mod map you created from the base game, or you can download a ready-made empty map. Just Google empty mod map farming simulator and then verify that you download a 2K map where each side of your map is 2048 pixels long. I already created one for myself, so I'll use this one. You don't absolutely have to use an empty map, but if you don't, please work with a copy of your map file in case you mess something up. You cannot undo script actions like procedural placement. Please save a backup. Future you will thank you. First, we need to create some masks. Go to the PP window and check which mask you have in your map. Window, Procedural Placement. I see here that I have one mask defined. We want to delete this mask. Right-click, delete mask. OK. Deleting the mask here will only delete the connection to the mask file and not the mask file itself. Then open the Windows Explorer and navigate to the map folder of your empty map. And there, again into the Data Masks folder. If you already have some files here, you can reuse them by copy-pasting and renaming them. If you don't have any, go to one of the standard maps and copy it from there. Try to copy a mask which is black or nearly black. For example, in the map US of the standard maps, you can find it under the program directory, data, maps, map US, and then under data masks, you have the Gen Gravel PNG. If you open that up, this one is basically all black with a few white lines. So we can use this as a basis. I copy it and then I go to my map and paste it there. And then I can rename it to what I want. I will use pp for procedural placement underscore bushland png. But you can basically name it whatever you want. Then go back to the Giants editor and the pp window, right click in the masks area and say add mask, and then navigate to your map directory and then select the mask which you just copied and created. Open, and now it has automatically filled the name. You can change it, but I don't recommend it to keep everything neat and tidy. And then click Apply Changes. And now it will also fill the resolution automatically because it has taken that from the file. Now we have a mask we can paint on. Close the PP window and check in the PP drop-down. So activate the Terrain Procedural Placement mode. And then in the drop-down, you should now see your newly defined PP Bushland mask. And we can also see these few white lines which we saw in the PNG file. They are here. You can delete them by painting with the right mouse button. If you have a lot to delete, make your brush really large, like 500 or so, and then you can delete everything. With such a large brush, don't paint, only click, otherwise the Giant editor might crash. Let's now paint an area on our new mask. Just do whatever random form you might think of. It's just for testing purposes. Now in my case, I already have a foliage on here. I want to get rid of that. Go to the foliage mode and then delete something around here, roughly where you painted the mask, so that we can later see what was created procedurally. Let's now first explore how the PP rules work with textures, and then the rest will be easier to understand. Open the Procedural Placement window again, and now go to the Rules tab. If you already have some rules over here, delete them with right-clicking and say Delete Rule. We want a clean example for this demo. So now we right-click and say Add Rule. Give your rule a name. I will use T for texture, and then grass test, but you can choose whatever name you like. Remember, I said I will use T for texture, F for foliage, and O for object. On the right side, under Script, we select Scatter in Mask. The Scatter in Mask script fills the painted area completely with the defined objects in a random pattern. We will see what that means in a second. Then under Arguments, we have Object Minimum Distance. Not relevant here because we don't place objects, we only paint textures. But Slope Start and Slope End might be relevant. You can use this if you want rocky textures on a steep slope, for example. And here under Mask, we select the mask we just created. Now down to Rule Objects. Right-click in the Rule Objects and choose Add Object. And then in the Name field, let me make that bigger, you can open the drop-down and you automatically have all the standard textures in here. Select the texture which is different from the one you already have. So I have grass obviously on my map, so let me choose Dirt Gravel. We don't change the other settings for now. Click on Apply Changes. Now we defined our first PP rule. You can either close the PP window now or move it to the side. I will just move it to the side because it's easier to get it back. Now save your file again. Since you cannot undo any script actions, this is the only way to go back if you don't like the result of your procedural placement. This is generally a good advice when working with scripts. Save often. And now go to the PP menu here and click on Execute Rules. And now we executed our first procedural placement rule. You see, it has filled the whole area with that texture. Technically, it scattered the selected texture in the area, But if there is only one texture in the rule objects, the result is a solid fill. If nothing happens for you at all, check your block mask. Anything painted there will block your procedural placement. You can see here I have white areas around my area. So you can erase that with the right mouse button. And this is already the core workflow of procedural placement. If you understand this, you already understand 70% of procedural placement. From here on, we are just building on the same idea, refine it and make it more detailed. Now, let's mix in another texture. I get the procedural placement window back, and now I add a second texture, which is again different from the one we already used. Let me use mud, for example. You can also play with the probability. This is this column here. The probability dictates how often each texture is painted. Which numbers you use here doesn't matter. It's only about the relation between the entries. So if I say dirt gravel 9 and mud 1, they make 10 in total. So in 9 out of 10 terrain pixels, dirt gravel will be used, and in 1 out of 10, mud. Click Apply Changes, and then execute the rules again. Now we see that we also get patches of mud. But with Scatter in Mask, we have no control over how these patches look and how big they are. If we want control over that, we can use Scatter in Perlin Noise. The script Scatter in Perlin Noise is different from Scatter in Mask because it does not fill the area completely. Instead, it creates random patches based on the settings we do. And you can control how these patches look. Let's remove the mud from the first rule, and then create a second rule where we use the Scatter in Perlin Noise script. So add rule. I will name this T grass test patches. And now we use the Scatter in Perlin Noise, which is also selected by default. Again, we have the object minimum distance, slope, start and end, and we select the mask which we created. But here we have a few more options. You see that we have seed, frequency, clamped, and clamp threshold. The seed is an arbitrary number for the randomness. So you can enter whatever number you like. But the same seed number and the same other settings will also give you the same result in the end. We will also use that in a minute. So for seed, I will just type 3000, for example, but you can also use the slider to just have whatever random number. The frequency steers how big the patches should be. If you use the lower number, the patches will become bigger. So let me use 0.1. The clamped setting true or false is basically if you want to use a gradient, yes or no. Normally with Scatter in Perlin Noise you probably set that to true. That means that the pixels on this mask will either be white or black, but nothing in between. If you say have clamped false, you will have a grayscale image. So I put that clamp to true, and then for the clamp threshold, you can choose whatever number you want between 0 and 255. If you use the slider here, you can enter crazy numbers, but that doesn't make sense. Only 0 to 255 will make a difference, so it makes more sense to enter it manually. If you set, for example, 120 over here, that means that everything below 120 will be black and everything above will be white. We have to play around with these settings to get a feeling for what they do. And for the rule objects, let's now add the mud again. Apply changes. and execute. We see that we see nothing. Oh, it did not save my setting about the mud over here. That's why nothing is happening. I had that earlier. If it doesn't save your selection, try to select something else, apply this, and then try again. Sometimes it's a bit buggy. Okay, now execute again. And here we have it. So now we have the ground texture with the dirt gravel, and on top of that we painted these patches with the scatter in Perlin noise script. So, and to get a feeling for what it does, you can now play around with these values. For example, let me make the threshold lower, put it to 100, apply, execute. You see that the patches get smaller. And if we use 140 instead, apply, execute, they get bigger. For the clamp threshold, the values between 80 and 180 make most sense. Above or below that will be nearly black or nearly white. You won't get a lot of patches. And for the frequency, you can also try around other settings. If you want smaller patches, for example, you can have a higher number here. Let's try 0.2, apply, and execute. You see now that we get a lot more patches, but smaller. So this is what the frequency does. You just have to play around with the settings to get something what you like. But for our example here, we want quite big patches. So I'll go back to the 0.03 and 120, apply, and execute. So now that we understand the basics, let's work on a real use case. We create a grassland with some patches of bushes and trees. We will do three things. We create one mask, we have it already, and we build two texture rules for this mask. We have these also, but we will change them. And then we will use the same idea for foliage and trees. So, go to the first rule we created, and let's change it to something which actually makes sense for a grassland. First thing we do in the rule objects is select grass. And here we will leave the probability of 9 for the grass, but we will add a few more related textures. Add object. And let's add grass dry, maybe with probability 2. And let's also add grass dirt. Now we have these. Apply changes. Now deactivate the second rule, the grass test patches. Apply changes again, and then execute. Now we get these grass textures, but with variations in them. You see it's not all the same green. This is what we want. If you like the result, just leave it. If you don't, tweak it until you like the result. And then for the patches with trees and bushes, we use the second rule. And here we use a more forest-like texture. So instead of mud, let's select forest leaves, maybe probability 4, and add another one like forest needles, probability 2, and a third one, forest ground, maybe, with probability 1. Apply the changes and execute the rules. Oh, I forgot to activate the rule. Apply changes again, execute. What we see now is where we had the mud, we now have the forest textures. But we have very harsh edges. I don't like that. And what we can do to soften them up a bit is adding grass over here also. Let's add grass, also with probability 1, I think. Apply, and then execute again. Maybe we could do with some more grass in here. Okay, now we have the forest ground, but it's a bit mixed up with the grass so that it doesn't have these harsh edges anymore. Okay, so far we only worked with textures. Now we'll use the exact same logic for foliage and trees. The rules section for foliage and trees works pretty similar, but in order to be able to select foliage and trees in the rules, we first have to create some objects, because these are not loaded into the PP window by default like the textures. So in the PP window, go to the Objects tab. And here in the upper part, I already said that this was for the textures. We don't need that. But the middle part is for the foliage. So right-click and say Add Foliage. Let's add a few different grass versions and some flowers and some bushes over here. If you select the foliage layer, for example, meadow, you get the second drop-down where it says Layer State, and you can select which one you want. This is exactly the same thing as you would see when terrain painting. So let's use the green small. You don't have to worry about these checkboxes, just click OK. And now it has added a line to our foliage section. It has automatically gotten the name Meadow Green Small. It's the foliage name Meadow, the channel Green Small, and the distance matrix we don't worry about for now. You can just leave the default. I will just add a few more grasses and flowers, but I will do that in a time lapse because it's just repetitive. This is a bit cumbersome, but the good news is that you only have to do this once. You can even reuse the settings here between your different map projects, or you can steal the settings from the base game maps. I will show you in part 2 how to exactly do this. Therefore, for this video, only add what you need for this demo. Now let's also add some bushes. Here, if you choose Deco Bush, and you select a layer state, for example, medium, and press OK, it will just give you Deco Bush followed by a number. I don't like that, so for these I change the number to basically have the name. I will do the rest also in time lapse. So this is the final result of what I added. You don't have to copy it exactly, just choose what you like. Now let's move to the objects. As I said, the objects you can add is something like trees, for example. You right-click and say Add Reference, and now you get a File Open menu, and there you navigate to your program directory, and there under Data, Maps, Trees, you have the tree selection. Just add a few of them. I will also do one, and then again the rest with time lapse. Let's use American Elm Stage 2, for example. You see it has added this one to the list. We see the name has been added automatically. We have the reference to the i3D file, and again the distance matrix, which we don't use in this video. I will add a few more in time lapse. Okay, now that we have the objects for foliage and trees, let's create the placement rules for them. Click Apply Changes, and then go to the Rules section again. Again, we right-click and add a new rule. Give it a name like F for foliage, grass test. For the first one, we want the background, so not the patches, but the rest. So again, we use the scatter in mask to fill the area completely as a first step. We leave the object min distance and slope and select our mask. And then on the rule objects, we add a few grass items. So add object, and then under name in the dropdown at the bottom, you now have your selected foliages and objects. So I will do green middle as a basis, put that to a quite high probability, like 100. Add another one, and there I do the meadow green small, but with a bit lower probability, like 40 maybe. And then add another one, harvest ready, with 10. So there is no right or wrong here, just choose what you like. And then to spice it up a bit, we add a small bush also. Let's use the Deco Bush Blueberry Short. That's a very small bush. And we leave that to 1, so that we only have it rarely. Apply the changes, and let's now execute this. You see, we have now the foliage. If I go closer, we see that we have a nice mixture of grass and these small bushes. And it looks very natural because not all the grass has the same size. And we also have these occasional other plants in here. By the way, the flowers here are added automatically by the Giants editor. This has not been done with a rule, but it is already part of the meadow green foliage. But as you can see, we have now also the grass on our patches, and this is because we did not define a rule yet for the patches. So let's do that now. We create another rule, and we name it F grass test patches. Here we use again the scatter in purlin noise, and to have the same patches, we will also use the same settings as we had in the other patches rule. So we can click on that. Oh, we first apply the changes, yes. And we did not set a mask, so let's do that now. It doesn't want to save it without a mask. Apply changes. And then let's check the grass test patches. We use the seed 3000, frequency 0.03, and clamp threshold 120. Let's use the same over here. 3000, 03, clamped true, and 120. This will make sure that we have the same patches and same patch size as in the other rule. And here for the rule objects, we should now select some more and bigger bushes, like for example Deco Bush Medium. Let me make that a bit bigger. Add another one. I will speed it up and show you the final result. So this is what I selected, and now we can also play around with the probability. Maybe we use the medium bush a bit more frequently, like this. Apply the changes and execute the rule. See what we got now. Now we have a lot of bushes. And this is because we didn't specify anything else. What we can do here is add the grass also here, so to have a bit less bushes. Add some meadow green middle also over here, and maybe put that to 5. Apply and execute again. Okay, now we have less bushes. And you see this already looks quite natural, and it is a nice landscape. But of course, we also need the trees. Let's get our procedural placement window back And now we will copy the existing rule for the F grass test patches. You can right-click that and say duplicate rule. And then you can rename it. I change it to O for objects and remove the number in the end. And now we still have the settings for the purlin noise we made over here. We only have to change the rule objects. So because now we have the foliage, but we don't want it, we want now trees. So we simply open the drop down, scroll down, and add our trees instead. If you have more foliage lines than trees, you can simply select the line and delete it. Apply the changes and execute. And this is what we got now. We have different ground textures, and our meadow looks really realistic because not all the grass has the same height. And on our patches, we have more bushes, we have a more forest-like ground texture, and we have these trees. The trees are added to the new transform group procedural placement in your scene graph over here. So it's easy to get rid of them if you don't like the result. By the way, if it didn't generate any trees for you, you might want to tweak your scatter in purlin noise settings, make the patches bigger. So this is our final result for part 1. Imagine how much time you can save if you are working on a complete map. Of course, setting up these rules for the procedural placement also takes time, so I wouldn't bother doing it for a landscape variation, which I only will use once or twice. But for the main landscapes like meadows or forests, it is a huge time saver. You can see here that the borders of our painted forests and bush patches look a bit harsh. There is not a nice transition between them. Now you could either go and start manipulating the landscape manually to have a more gradual change between the different PP rules, or you could learn how to calculate the fall-off border from one mask to create such a transition automatically. This is what we will cover in the next video. Then we will also look at the other available scripts, because today we only use the scatter in mask and scatter in purlin noise. But there is so much more you can do. For example, you can calculate the masks against each other. If there is an area already on one mask, you can exclude it from another mask. Or you can add two masks together. Or you can let your mask react on objects in your scene, for example roads. If there is a road object placed, you can let the Giants editor create a mask for it automatically. This way, you can paint road underground and borders automatically, which is also a huge time saver. Or you can create a mask based on a certain terrain height or slope for automatic underwater or mountain rocks textures. You see, we only did the basics today, but there is so much more you can automate with procedural placement. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Now you have a basis for building your own procedural placement rules. Go ahead, definitely try it out on your own and get a feeling for it, because in the next video we will dive deeper into this. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and leave your additional questions or video requests in the comments, because doing so would help me reach more people who need to see this. Please click here for a related video, or here for another one you might like. Don't be a stranger. See you next time.